Yes, you are audible.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my name is Karthik, and hope everyone here or for AP testing batch. And I could see some old people from the previous batches and many new people here in the participant pane. So this is going to be today, and tomorrow is going to be your demos. It will just see a quick introduction about what is an API, how it basically functions, and like what are the structure and components and all those things, right? And
your phone hidden garbage has reached the limit. Please clean it up.
And from next week, we will continue with the regular sessions. All right. So let me share my screen. Is everyone able to see my screen? And you can actually reply in the chat window. Every time you don't have to, everyone doesn't have to unmute and like speak. Replying in the chat window would be more than sufficient actually. Screen is visible, right? Yes, okay. And one more thing, so before getting started, right? Every time, like I used to get like who are my target audience and like where are they from? Are they the students or experienced professional? And so, how many of you are students or here? Actually, you can reply in the chat window. Students or freshers, just who have started career in the automation or testing or whatever. Don't think see any replies. Okay, how many of people are experienced, and if experienced, like how many years of experience and those details?
Hi. Yeah, I have a 15+ years of experience. Yeah, currently I'm working as a senior technical lead in my company and working on few of the Postman projects. That's why I have joined this course. Just to have a good knowledge over.
Okay, great. Okay, few are beginners and 7 years, 8.5 years. Okay, so I assume majority of people here are from manual testing who are getting started with automation along with Java API, right? Okay. Okay, great. Okay, let me give a quick introduction about myself. My name is Karthik, right? I have like around 8.5 years of experience in IT field currently. I'm currently working with Amazon as an SD2. So I initially started my career as a tester, right? And initial 4-5 years I was initial first year I was into like manual testing, and later I've learned automation and learned Selenium, and I subsequently learned API and rest assured and those related tools. And later I got interested in doing development when I was in company called Freshworks. I like switched to development domain, and from there recently I switched to Amazon as an software development engineer too. Right? So totally I have just interest in coding and data structures and algorithms and APIs and all those things, right? Which is also one of the reason currently like taking sessions with doing freelance training with weight automation for API testing, right? Okay. Fine. So today what we are going to see is like we don't have to directly jump into like API or rest assured or Postman as such. So every time what I used to do is like I just start with what is an API kind of understanding perspective of what's an API and how it is actually functioning in the background, right? And once we get that little understanding, maybe we'll see a small examples and jump into the larger chip, right? As we progress through with the weeks and the sessions, right? And let's make this session a little interactive by responding in the chat as and when if I ask any questions, so that I will also know that my target audience are actively listening, and maybe it will be a little more engaging than simply me speaking and completing the sessions throughout. Okay. So let me start with this basic question again, like what's an API actually? I mean, we all know what is an abbreviation of an API, but I don't want that. But generally, what is an API? Any explanation in the chat would be appreciated. We all know API is application programming interface, right? But what does it actually do? Okay, API is someone is responding, right? Basically, a call that gives a status of hitting what?
You may
Yes.
extend the service, maybe.
Yes. Service is fine. Middle layer, yes, and we'll get the response. Yes. Communication between two systems. Yes. So that would be more a general and appropriate answer, right? And what are the other answers are also okay, but it is little into an in-depth level. Let's see what's a API in a high level, right? I think Vikrant has answered to a somewhat relevant. So let's say there are two systems over the internet. Let's not call it a system. Let's call it two computers for a simplicity, right? Let's say there's a computer, one sitting in one corner of the world. Let's say Sydney. Okay, and there's a computer two sitting in another corner of the world. Let's say LA, Los Angeles, right? So let's say these two computers want to communicate with each other, right? What is the way to do that? Obviously, it's going to be via internet. And through the internet, there are various protocols that you can actually follow to be able to communicate with the another computer, right? Through a series of networking concepts. And we call that as an ISO or OSI model, right? So there are various layers involved, like application layer, transport, session layer, presentation layer, and each have a particular work to do in this communication process. I'm not going to go deep into that ISO, OSI and all, right? It's just a standard, maybe you can understand more deeply. So at the end of the day, I mean, more deeply when you have a look in the internet, but at the high level, what is happening? One computer is going to connect with another computer and it needs some protocol. So what are the examples of protocol? Let's say TCP can be one protocol, right? TCP IP, right? So what is a protocol? Like it's a set of rules governing communication between two computers on the internet, right? Simply, you cannot transfer a message without any organization or structure or what that message is intended to do. That will be, if so, the internet will be chaos, right? So there should be some kind of way where everyone accepts, hey, I'm going to send universally, this is the right format or right template in which I'm going to send a message to you, or this is the right template with which I can receive that particular message, right? And those senders and receivers agree over certain protocols, and the protocol can be TCP/IP or can be HTTP, right? And so on, right? It can be an FTP protocol, right? So on. So what happens is like once a sender and receiver agree, say I'm going to communicate this particular data over this particular protocol. In our example, we are primarily going to deal with HTTP kind of request. Right? So now they will establish a connection link between the sender and the receiver, and the sender will send, let's say, sender will send a message, and receiver will say, hey, I have received this message, and it will acknowledge, right? I have received your data structure successfully in this particular format, right? So when I say format, why we need a formatting or a template while sending a data in more in-depth answer I want. Why we need a format or template while sending data from one computer to another computer, right? What is the need for that? Any answers? So just like that, if I send some random data over the internet, what happens?
You don't wanna send the wrong data or like something vulgar or like the what is call it, the mail forms, stuff like that. That's what we need, some format and protocol we need, right?
Yes, yes, you're also correct. But on a higher level, yes, there are many right responses in the chat as well. So to understand the message, right? Simply if we send some random messages, hey, hello, or images, or even text, or whatever it is over the internet, the sender will know what he has sent, but the receiver has to understand what the other person has sent, right? So to make this communication possible, there should be a set of rules or standards that everyone should follow, so that it is actually organized and everyone can understand what is the other person is trying to say, right? So in this example, a sender is generally called a client, okay? And a receiver who is processing this message is called a server. At the end of the day, both are computers sitting in one corner of the world, right? But the purpose is different based upon what the computer does, right? If the computer is sending a particular data over the internet, it is called a client. And the server or a computer which receives this data for which it is intended to be sent in the first place is called a server, right? And let's do a simple analogy of the two systems, right? Let's say I want to communicate with another person, right, in the another part of the world. So what are the basic things I need to understand, right? Whether the language I'm communicating will be able to understand from the other person's perspective or not. So language is very, very important. No? What if I talk in English and the other person is not even understanding? He's from Greece and he knows only Greek. Very, very important. Language is important, and what are the other aspects that are important for a communication to happen between two parties? So the context, what I'm actually communicating is also, if I simply start some random topic to start with another person, they will not know, right, what I'm actually communicating with the other person. I need to set a context. Hey, I'm going to speak about this, or I'm intending to speak about this, right? And what can be the other aspects? Any answers? What about security? So let's say I want to talk to a person and pass some important information alone to him. So I should make sure that no other person in the middle should be able to process or track that information. Let's say I'm giving some important OTP to another person, right, to be able to transfer his money or something. It should not be intercepted by the other persons, right? When I'm intending to communicate with only one person, the other part of the world, it should be delivered to him only, not to any other persons, right? These are the three main important context of communication that can happen. I mean, there are other components also, but what are the three main components? The language, context, and the security aspects of the communication to happen. Okay. And see, the client can be computer means you don't have to assume a computer like a laptop or desktop sitting in your like sitting in front of you. So what can be the clients? We saw the client is something which is going to send the data to be able to be understood by the server. So who all can be qualified as a client? Any answers?
The Postman is one of the client.
Sorry, your voice is a little bass. I'm not able to. Maybe you can like put it in the chat window, and yeah. Yes. Yes. So browser, yes. Postman, yes. So let me write it down. Postman, browser can be a Chrome or IE or Firefox, right? And actually Vishal Sharma has answered more relevantly, no? So anything which makes a request can be qualified as a client, yes. Any standalone application, yes. Standalone app. We'll come to context, right? What's the context? So first we'll see what are the clients, right? So Postman is a client. Why it's a client? It is able to communicate to the server through its UI. Whatever we do via Postman, it is able to send the data to the server, and we are seeing the response back. No, and the browser says obviously. So you hit google.com, facebook.com. Hope you have heard about recent sessions and layoffs in everywhere. Yes, right. Okay. So Google, Facebook. So whatever you hit, it is able to fetch some response back to you, right? So those kind of things can be called as a client, right? What about your mobile application? Let's say I'm using a Facebook app or even WhatsApp or Instagram. Can this be this Instagram app in our mobile, right? Can this be called as a client?
Yes.
Yes, right. Because it also processes some information.
Yes.
And gives us a response. Let's say you are opening your Instagram wall. You're able to see your friends or celebrities' photos and video feeds, right? How it is processing? Some request is being triggered by your Instagram app, so that the Instagram server in the other part of the world responds with the relevant content, and it is loaded to you. So Instagram is also a client, right? So client can be of many forms, and it is not like whatever we visually see is only the client. It can take many forms. And what about a terminal window? Can we call this as a client? This is the terminal, right?
Yeah, we can also say this. Yeah, we can say because of whatever we are entering anything, no, it will give some result.
Right. So the terminal can be also classified as a client. So I'm the client. I know what I'm sending to the server. Okay. Let's say the classic case of Instagram. Let's say you are using an Android or iPhone. In iPhone, I think the apps are developed using Swift or something, right? Programming language. And in your Android, most probably the languages are developed in app or languages, or the core systems are developed in Kotlin. No, it's a variation of Java, right? Okay, so let's say there are different. And if you take a browser, mainly it deals with JavaScript. No, browser code engine is actually developed in JavaScript, and I hope everyone knows this. Java and JavaScript are totally different, not related to each other at all. Okay. So your browser core engine, browser engine is developed and maintained in JavaScript or Node.js, right? And what else? So the client can be developed in any programming language, right? And it is not necessarily that the server has to necessarily be built in the same programming language, right? Let's say the client is using JavaScript, okay? And let's say the server is built using Ruby as a programming language. Totally different languages, no? So if I'm sending some request in JavaScript, the server receives some data, right? how this communication is actually possible, right? Any answers? My client is written in JavaScript, but the server is in the Ruby programming language. How this communication is possible?
With interface.
With an interface, yes, that's a work of the API. So only it's an application programming interface, no. But how, in a very raw term, what is happening inside? Yes, there are some right answers pouring in. There might be between one language that can bridge between. Yes. Yes, JSON is an example. Yes. So JSON is one of the formats that are universally kind of in use majorly. Right? It's not like it is going to be the one and only format where the people can communicate. It is also one of the format which are majorly used today in the tech world to be able to communicate between one system and another system. Right. So what actually happens in a very raw term is this particular data in which the client wants to communicate, the data will be actually converted to a JSON object. Okay, again, what is a JSON? I hope everyone is aware of what is JSON, no? Nothing new, right? What is a JSON? Okay, so any key value pair which are represented, a key is usually almost always a string. Value can be a string or boolean or whatever. We'll see structure of the JSON later. Any key value pair or a collection of key value pairs in this very specified template or structure is a JSON, right? JSON actually comes from JavaScript world, actually JavaScript object notation. Right, it is actually primarily feature how you develop an object, how you declare an object inside a JavaScript. Anyway, since its simplicity and ease of understanding, right, and the ecosystem built around JSON in different programming languages, JSON become very popular choice in let's say data format. It's not a programming language, no. JSON is not a programming language. It's a data format through which communication happens between two systems, right? So my client can be built in a JavaScript or it can be in Kotlin or Swift, right? Doesn't matter. As long as I send this data in a JSON format and the receiver is also able to understand this in a JSON format, right? The problem is sorted out. No? Since JSON is a way of structuring your data, not actually a programming language, there is a library that will be available in your JavaScript. JavaScript has inbuilt support for JSON, or there will be a library available in Ruby to be able to take that JSON data and be able to decode or in the very tech term, deserialize this data into a Ruby kind of environment, a Ruby kind of world, so that the conversion between those programming languages and data takes place very seamlessly, right? So that is what the first concept of language means, no? So I am actually in this example, what happens in the API world, I'm actually saying, hey, I'm going to send out or I'm going to communicate with you in this language only, in a common language only, right? And the receiver also will know that particular common language. The person who I'm talking with will also know that language so that he can interpret that language and understand what the data is actually about, right? So we are understanding what.
I got one quick question. So you say that there will be the JSON library contains in the JavaScript and Ruby server as well.
Right.
That's how they connect each other.
Yes, it will be available. So it might not be inbuilt in a programming language like Ruby, right? For example, even in Java, it is not inbuilt. Support for JSON. There are the, libraries like org.json, okay? Or there are there's a library called Jackson, which we'll see in the later part of these courses. these are the libraries in Java, which is acting as a support system to able to parse this JSON and read the data containing in the JSON, convert back to the Java world.
Okay, understand.
Similarly, in Python, Ruby, whatever programming language you take, there will be inherent support for JSON. So only like it is universally currently used as a major data carrier throughout your APIs. And what is the other famous format? No? XML used to be a very famous format, right? In which a protocol called SOAP was developed. But I still talk to a few of my students here, in the previous batches, they still use SOAP, maybe the legacy products that they have been maintaining or using for the past maybe 15-20 years. So SOAP is a little complicated architecture, involves XML. But what's the problem with XML, right? Any answers? The structure itself is a problem, no? Right? So you have an opening tag, closing tag. In one tag only, there will be so many attributes, heavy, yes. And difficulty in parsing and understanding by just looking at the very raw terms, right? It is very actually difficult while passing the XML, right? So only like, and also the SOAP architecture itself is very complicated architecture. Now you have a WSDL file, you have to like understand what object translates into the what object in the server and client world. So then came the concept of REST, right? REST protocol, which eliminated all the complexities. It still supports XML, but majorly is currently used with JSON, right? So this is representational state transfer objects, no? So it represents the state of the particular API or particular data that is being transferred, nothing else. So when I mean state, what happens is like I will say to the particular person what kind of data I wanted to send, right? So that is where someone was asking what's the context. That is where context comes. See, I have decided, okay, I'll send the data in a commonly accepted language or a data format like JSON. Okay, I have done that, but what is the context I have to say them, no? Whether I am asking some data from you or I'm giving some data so that you store in a database, that's called context, right? And also the context can be many things, and these are the support data that you might be needed so that this action can be performed. We'll see some examples. Right, so you have to set the context of what that communication is going to do between the two parties, right? Or so without the context, the client will also not know what is happening there. It will receive the message successfully, but it doesn't know what to do with it, right? Context is very, very important, right? So the context can be, let's say, as simple as the REST protocol saying, hey, this is a GET API. What's the purpose of the GET API?
To fetch the data.
Fetch the data, right? So I'm saying, so when I, in the protocol or in the HTTP method session of the REST, I say get, that means a server sees that and understand, okay, he's trying to get some data from me, right? He's not giving some data to me, he's trying to get some data from me, right? So that is where the context is very, very important, no? So let's say get in generally used to get some data from the server. So there should be some, so this is where the protocol comes into picture. See, you have some certain set of rules, right? So when I wanted to fetch the data, use this get method is rules that is specified by the protocol, so that universally everyone is going to follow, so that it is easy for the client also to apprehend this and easy for server also to understand and respond back to it, right? And what can be the other context? Let's say, hey, I understand you want some data from me. A server is saying, hey, understand, I understand.
Put some data onto the server.
Sorry?
To put some data onto the server.
That's fine. We'll come to that. But now the server is saying, server sees this get request and understands, hey, I understand you want some data from me, but it also has to know what data that I want, right? Right or not? So then only the server knows whether it can fetch the data in the correct place or not. So that what data I want, no? Where I will specify that in the request. Either I will specify as a query parameter in a get request. We'll come to the query parameters, or in the path parameter we'll come to.
It also takes input from the header.
Header, if you ask me, is it possible? Yes, it is possible, but is it right way to do? I don't think so.
What is the better practice to do? Either passing the parameters in a URL or through the header?
It can be a combination of the, passing the parameter in the URL, ideally for get kind of method, is the right way to do. You don't have to necessarily pass any information that you wanted to get in the headers. Headers is mainly for cookie authentication, authorization, and the content type that you're going to specify. What type of content is this, right? So those kind of things, right? You don't have to necessarily specify what data that I wanted to fetch in a get request. No? Technically, if you ask, is it possible? Yes, it is, but it is right thing to do or no? Okay. Right. So now we have set the context. No, these are the query parameters. These are the path parameters. We'll come to what is this and all very shortly. Now, server sees all these data coming from the client. Then it will understand. Okay, hey, so this is a get API, and this is the query parameter and or path parameter for which I have to search and give the data back to the client. So there are multiple things that can happen here. Okay. So first thing is like anyone cannot request data from me, right? Let's say I'm using one Instagram account, right? Can I access some other person's Instagram profile just by hacking or doing some tricks over the API? Should not do, right? So most of the times in the real world, the security is very, very important aspect of when you build the system, no, API. So there should be some authentication mechanism saying that, hey, this is the right person, which are actually requesting this data, right? So all these things comes in the context and security part, no? So now we understanding, and all these are specified how I was saying, right? You should not specify the data that you're going to request in the header section. It is because headers are interpreted by many things, right? But when you put something, let's say we are talking about a get request. Let's say if you want to post some data to the server, right? Let's say I want to save some data to the server. It's a valid use case, no? So at that case, in those kind of examples, if you are going to put your data into the header, what happens? Header can be read by many middleware parties. It's not secure in the first place, right? But when you put the authorization token, it's secure because it's at the end of the day, it is actually a token which is actually encoded in certain format. So let's say there is a particular thing called load balancer. I hope few people, expensive practice here knows a load balancer, I guess. If not, we'll come back to that. Load balancer is a kind of a middleware which redirects your request by reading the header of an API. Okay, so it is not necessary that a load balancer has to know what is there in the request body, right? So in those kind of scenarios and those kind of examples, you don't need to pass anything in the header information. So headers are mainly for your server to authorize or authenticate or get some additional information about your request, or in the middleware like load balancer to redirect your request. Doesn't have to necessarily contain some information. So again, all these things are governed and actually given to you by those protocols which govern the entire internet, right? So HTTP, I was talking about this HTTP request, no? What is this HTTP request actually? Hypertext tensor protocol, yes, but what it actually does. So whenever you try to hit an website, no. So what is this? Let's say I'm going to google.com, right? So what happens? The page is loading for me, but what happens in the middle? Any answers? So what is this call? It's an HTTPS call, right? You go to this protocol session, it says HTTPS, right?
SSL stands for the security and certificate installation, SSL certificate.
Right. But how this communication is actually possible? What is happening in between? Between the time I hit this google.com and the time the page loads, so what's happening in between?
Client hits the request to the server. Before going to the server, it goes to ELS, ELB. Then
Load
it
balance.
then it passes through that API, which is requesting. It's a GET request. Then वहाँ पर DB होगा. Either it's a Redis or जो cache mechanism होगा. Then it is serving the request to the client back.
Right. So in this example, do I need a DB to load the Google website?
Cache DB तो Redis वगैरह चाहिए होगा.
But DB is used to store certain data, no? Do we see any data here? It is a pre-designed page that is loaded, no?
No, here we don't need.
So where this Google web page is coming from? Okay, I will answer that question in some time. So the answer is correct actually, right? Almost there. So what happens is like on our Rotom, whatever he said is correct. It goes to the server processes this request and it's a GET request, yes, and the response is got back, no? But how this address is resolved, right? So someone has answered, I guess, right? There is something called domain name servers, and it will resolve this particular google.com to a particular IP address, no? And those IP address will be common and unique for a particular region. Let's say if I'm loading Google from India, it will load me Google India's website. All right. If I load Google from UK, it will load me Google UK's website. Technically, the web page will look same, but some alterations. Like for example, if since I'm logging in from India, I can able to see, hey, do you want to choose from different languages? Maybe if I'm logging from UK or USA, the page might look little different, right? So, and if you actually go to this page, I hope everyone would have seen this thing. No, what is this thing opening in the bottom? It's a Chrome's developer console.
Chrome dev tool.
Yes, Chrome tools. So if I hit, it will give me series of things that are happening. If I hit google.com, it will give me the series of things that are happening so that this website is actually getting loaded successfully. So primary call, first call that is getting triggered is this get call, right? As he rightly answered, right? So google.com will actually resolve to a particular IP address, right? So this is the remote address that is resolving. And since it's an HTTPS call, it's going to this port called 443. Generally, 443 port is reserved for your HTTPS call. And what's the port for HTTP calls? It's 80 port. Yes, right? It's not 442, it's 80 port. Okay, so now what happens is like now the server sitting the other Google will understand, hey, this server is originating from India. And how this particular Google knows that the server is originating from India, request is originating from India, based on the IP address, right? So if you resolve any IP address, it will actually resolve to a particular area, right? I hope you're aware of those things, no? So there will be a bunch of IP addresses, and those IP, based on the IP address, you can actually set the location, right? location or find the location of a particular like origin of the request. No, most probably it will be correct. Location may not be accurately correct to your street or area locality, but to be it will be almost correct to your state level or country level to the least, right? Now the Google servers will redirect your request to your nearest servers, right? Google, this client will redirect this request to your nearest servers, and the server will process the information, sees get request, and you see what happens. It will respond back certain things. Okay? I'll show you. It is going. I'll show you actually this. So if you see here, there are. I mean, this is the actual URL of the request. This is the what HTTP method I'm going to do, and what is the status code actually?
Response code.
Response code. Wait, it says, hey, the response is successful. 200 means successful, right? And if you see, these are the response headers. So some response is coming back from the server, and it also will have a response header and the response body, you know. And we don't have to worry about most other things. They might be used by the Google for some logic, right? You don't have to worry about the things. But if you see here in the response header,
It's below cookies and all.
I'm just looking for. Even in the request headers, if you see, same, since I'm using Mac OS, it is sending me like information. It is what kind of client I am and all those kind of information, everything it is sending. No? Now, fine. So what kind of response am I getting here? What is this response? Is this a JSON response? So we were till now we were talking about how a common language or common data is required to be able to communicate between the two servers, right? Now, since this Chrome is a client, right? I was talking about generally browsers are built on which programming language?
HTML, CSS,
And JS.
JS,
JavaScript,
right? Mainly, yes,
yeah.
JavaScript, right? So now the request is originating from a JavaScript world, right? But we don't know what is the server is built in. Server can be built in Java, it can be built in Ruby, Python, whatever it is. Now the response is not a JSON, but the response is in which format?
HTML.
It's an HTML format, right? So actually a HTML is returned as a response for our query, right? So the idea is you don't have to necessarily, since a JSON is the most widely used, it is not necessarily server will return a JSON alone, right? HTML is also one common data type or a data structure through which the data can be communicated, right? So HTML as a whole can be also be written. So if you see this as an HTML document, with some JavaScript embedded into it, can you see some functions and all? Right? Some logic is written inside this, right? And now there are a few questions comes along with this, right? So then I mean, someone answered what are the three components of a browser? No, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. What are these three components? We are receiving an HTML, but why we are seeing some JavaScript inside this?
For the validation part.
Validation, partly yes, but what is it that actually does?
JS is something which is available at a client side for injecting client requirements, like some task client need to perform locally. So JS is used to implement those.
Yes, correct. That is also one of the answer. So on a very broad term, we can call JavaScript actually handles the functionality of your website, right? So let's say, see, this is an interactive website, agree with me or not? For example, if I click here, see the list of the previously searched items is actually loading for me, right? And if I click here, it is going to activate my microphone and all, right? So it is actually very interactive website. It's not a static website, right? So these interactions come from JavaScript. Agree with me or not? Right. So JavaScript is responsible for actually doing all these things. But if you see here, the basic code, every JavaScript cannot be directly put. Some JavaScript is there, yes, but not every JavaScript is actually coming from this HTML itself, right? There are certain components along with this loaded. If you see here, this loads what? Wait, I think this is an JavaScript. Yes, it loads JavaScript only. Right? It's a Java. It's a out and out JavaScript file. If you see here, right? The response is completely JavaScript. But if you see here, the response is actually an image. This and this response is an XML, right? This is again a CSS file, right? This is again a JavaScript, right? So what happens here is there are some JavaScript that is present in the original HTML that is returned from the GET request, right? Remember original request. Now we'll write it down. So when I hit google.com, what actually happens is it returns one HTML page, right? And this HTML page contains some JavaScript, right or not? Now, what this JavaScript internally does is it will trigger a series of other requests. Okay. JavaScript can be used to trigger an API request, right? Agree with me or not? Right? I don't know why there is complete silence now. Okay. So what this JavaScript does is it will trigger subsequent JavaScript request. And will load certain components like image, CSS files, and other JavaScript files, right? For the entire website to be complete. If you can see the segregation here. I just selected the all files here. If you wanted to see only image files, you can click on here. If you see the content here, this is my profile photo, right? This profile photo is actually fetched from a separate API call, right? And the response is what? Response is actually an image. No, if you see here, this is a response header. I'm just searching for the content type. Yes, if you see the content type is an image, right? And if you see the response here, it is actually running my profile photo, right? Which you are actually seeing in the top right corner. So what is the conclusion? This particular google.com did not return my image, profile image, right? Rather, google.com returned an HTML response, right? And that HTML response contained some JavaScript. And that JavaScript in turn triggered one of the API call which fetched my image, profile image. Is this confusing or am I making it a little clear? So idea is not all the data comes from the first request itself. So if you hit google.com, it is not that everything that you see in this web page is loaded in a single request. It is actually a combination of multiple requests that is actually originated from your original HTML file that is you are getting. Am I confusing or is this clear?
I have a question. Okay, so I understand until the HTML contained the JavaScript, but when that picture was fetched, so that means like a JavaScript also, the trigger the image from other API.
Yes. See, the particular original HTML that we receive doesn't have to contain all the information that you see in the web page, and it is not feasible also. Why? Because I have logged with my email ID. If you log in with your email ID, right, your image will be different here, right? So it is not work of the original request. Original request is what? I'm just simply hitting google.com. No, it is not the work of the original request to rightly load your image files or image, right? it is the work of the subsequent request that is actually triggered from your JavaScript. Right? Why I'm saying why this is important is someone was asking, saying where this request is actually originating from. No, someone was answering, is it from some database or is it from Redis? No, it is not from those kind of databases. It is something called CDNs, right? You can treat as a CDN as a simply a caching layer or a hard disk that is very near to you. Okay. Why this is important, because when you are hitting google.com, you can hit from any corner of the world, right? Let's say if we are in India, you can hit this website from any corner of India. I am down south in Tamil Nadu, you can be in north, northeast, west, south. So the goal of any website is to load the website faster for you, right? And this particular fastness is achieved through this particular concept called CDN. CDN stands for Content Delivery Network. Okay. So now what Google does is like, it will have some partnership with these CDN providers, or it will have itself own CDN infrastructure, so that all this HTML, whatever you see is an HTML response. No, this HTML file will be stored in a particular location or a particular caching layer, location cache near you, right? And that will be delivered immediately to you based on your request. Okay, the server will process your request, but the server will redirect the CDN, which is containing this HTML file, to be returned to you as a response. Right now, this much we are understanding. No, yep. CDN is like a caching layer. It is the responsibility of the CDN to return this HTML file for you. But this kind of personalization, the personalization in the sense, for me, my profile data has to load. For you, your profile data has to load. If this information is contained within this HTML, is that a right solution? The idea is to deliver you HTML, right? But for me, it should look different. For you, it should look different. So if I put this HTML image data in the same HTML, right, the end goal is not achieved, right?
Right.
Everyone will get the same image, which is not a desired output. No.
Understand. In order to make a dynamic, yeah.
Yeah. So for making it dynamic, what Google does is, this HTML will contain some JavaScript. We saw, right? This HTML response actually has some JavaScript. No. And the idea behind JavaScript is what? It will actually analyze or be responsible for a behavior of your website, right? Right or not? So since I already logged in with my Gmail, the JavaScript work is here is like, the page is loaded, JavaScript will be triggered. JavaScript will actually analyze whether this particular browser is logged in with Gmail or not. Okay. So the first step, what JavaScript will do is, right, analyze if Gmail is logged in this browser. Okay. So this JavaScript will contain some code, so that will make this happen, right? And once this response comes as yes, okay, something has logged in. Now it will take that information, right? Who has logged in? That information is got from actually some local data that is stored in your browser. Okay. Now it will know who has logged in, right? If it is able to tell whether I'm logged in or not, it should be able to tell who has logged in. No. Right or not?
Yep.
Now that who has logged in information will be contained in something called cookie in your browser. We'll come to what is cookie later part. For very simplicity, you can consider this cookie as a data that is actually unique to a particular user. Okay. Now what this JavaScript does is, it will trigger one more API call. Okay. API call to Google servers. Now note this API call is not actually triggered by the browser, but it is triggered by the JavaScript present inside this HTML. Okay. When I hit google.com here, this is triggered by browser, but this API call to Google is actually triggered by this JavaScript. Okay, that is that JavaScript present inside this HTML. Now, what API call is this? Hey, I know who is this person. That person is who is this person is contained within this cookie, right? Use this cookie information, right, and fetch me the actual image of this person's profile, right? That is what you see here in the images, no? An image API call. In the request headers or somewhere in the request, there will be some information passed. Where are the request headers? Maybe this is the encoded value. You are seeing some data right here, some endpoint URL. So in any one of these information that my identity will be sent as an encoded format. Now the server will know, hey, Karthik has logged in this browser. So return Karthik's image as a response, right? So this is how the image is got, and it is a responsibility of JavaScript to load the image in the rightmost corner of the website, whatever you see here. Right. This flow is clear, or is this too much for day one?
I understand now. Thank you.
So what about others? Is this flow clear? Because this is very important to understand how the API functions. It's not like when you work with real-time application, no, it's not a straightforward case of, hey, you are hitting a server, you're getting the response. But in turn, what that does internally is very, very important. So to summarize, whatever you see in this Google page is not a single API call. The first API call is triggered by the browser. The subsequent API calls, whatever you see here, the relevant information for my Google homepage is actually triggered by the JavaScript present inside the original API response, right? And all those data are clubbed together to actually give me this single web page, right? So if you see, to make this very simple Google web page possible, there are at least 15 API calls that are actually triggered. See, it is actually loading few informations. No, if you see the image section, this is my profile data, and I think this image must be somewhere, right? This Google image must be somewhere in the page. Just open this and analyze these kind of, and if you see here, just can you see the list of icons, Google icons? This is actually loaded for this purpose, no?
Yeah.
Right or no?
Yeah.
Right. So whatever you see in the web page is actually loaded from different API calls, right? The icons and here and all, and it's very actually like interesting to analyze by opening this Chrome developer tools. Maybe you can just do this after the session over. So based on the simple example, what we saw, what we understand. So there are many API calls that are clubbing together to make one single web page possible. But let's go to a little micro level. No? To make this web page possible, there might be multiple API calls. But for a single API call, there should be only one responsibility. No? For example, we saw the API call where fetches my image. For that API call, what will be the responsibility? If you give the request, giving my identity, hey, fetch the photo of Karthik, then it will go and fetch the photo of Karthik only, right? And what are the possible test cases that you can derive from this API, functionality? Now, it should not take the profile picture of any other person. It should load the right picture. If I update the picture, it should update it immediately, right? All those things are there, right? So this is where the API testing comes into picture. No, this is a simple example I'm giving to you. Okay. And it should be in the correct size, correct format, and it should be in the correct location in my web page. Everything is there, right? So all these things are part of your API testing. Okay? I mean, sorry, not API testing as end-to-end testing, but in the API, what you can actually verify is whether the response is actually successful or not, whether you got the image or not, whether the image is in the right format and the structure or not. Those kind of simple things you can verify in your API calls, right? So we are understanding little about the clients, how the clients actually functions, right? It will trigger a particular request, and the response is got from the server, and it is a work of the client. In this example, our client is a browser. It's a work of the client to actually organize all these requests and render a proper output for us, right? Same thing is done by your any Android or iOS application. You use Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, iMessage, whatever it is you are doing, right? It will be a series of multiple API calls, and it's a work of the client to put this data in the right boxes. If you're opening Instagram, your profile should be in the top right corner, your feed should load in the center, and your reels should load in the reels button should be in the center, search button should be in the left, and the home button should be in the left corner. Everything is decided by the template in which the response data has to be loaded. The template is defined by many things. In the browser, the template is defined by HTML. HTML stands for structure of the particular web page. HTML only decides what structure the particular web page should look like. Yes or right? Yes or no? I mean, we saw what is the work of the JavaScript. What's the work of the HTML then? Defines structure of the web page. Layout, yes.
UI.
How the website should look like. Google website is looking like this because of primarily because of HTML. And what does CSS do? CSS is also part of a web page, right?
Maybe beautify the web page.
Sorry, I missed.
Beautify the web page, like how it's coloring, maybe like a layout.
Beautify, or in a very simple terms, it gives the style, right? How the particular page should be styled. It's
Yeah,
and what's
that's
a
good.
yeah, what's the JS? JS we just saw. JS is for functionality, right? So all this combined together forms your client response, not the request, response. Okay, whatever you see as a response from the client like browser. Okay, now since we little understood about client, we'll see about servers, right? So we saw whatever that is actually originating the request is client. Now what is the server then? Whatever is processing the request can be called as a server, no? Yes or no? The request. Now, what is this whatever actually? Server is just a fancy term for another computer. It is just a computer sitting in another end of the world, and is going to receive your request from the client and understand what is that request and sends back the appropriate response or process the appropriate data coming from the client, right? It is just another computer. The server is a very, even when I started my career, they used to say server and all those things. I used to think there might be some something extraordinary going on. Nothing extraordinary and all. Server is just a computer that is sitting in the other end of the world to be able to understand and process your request correctly, right? So now there should be something running on the server to be able to understand your request. No. First, server needs an operating system, like how browser is installed in the operating system called Mac OS here, or how your Instagram or Facebook is installed in your OS called Android or iOS, right? Similarly, server also needs an OS to operate, right? Can anyone say me what is a famous server OS?
NGINX.
Sorry, didn't get.
Linux or anything, Unix, we can.
Yes, Unix is very famous. Linux or Unix kind of environment. Now, let's say I'm having this Mac OS. No, can this Mac OS act as a server OS?
Yes, it can.
Yes, technically it can. So before few years, there was this server OS very famous. I'm talking about few years in the sense before 10 years or 12 years. There is this something called Windows Server. Have you heard of this OS actually? Windows 7, Windows Vista, Windows 10,
Yeah.
Windows 11. Similarly, like there's a separate OS that was designed for a server called Windows Server itself. Right? So now, actually, Windows, I don't think many companies, Windows has its own applications, I'm not denying it. But most of the companies have moved to Linux-based servers because it's very powerful and in the set of instructions and a kind of things that can be done over the Linux, right? A very secure and powerful thing actually. And also the updates for security patches in the Linux kind of operating system is very, very frequent from the open source community. No? Now, everything in the Linux is not free. There is something called Red Hat. Heard of this company? Red Hat has this RHEL, Red Hat Linux Enterprise OS, right? Which it can actually monetize by giving you this operating system for a particular price, a particular charge. Okay, it's totally up to you whether you are using a Red Hat based OS for your servers, or totally you are relying any open source based servers or not. It's totally up to you. But people tend to go with some distributions of Red Hat. May be paid, may not be paid, depending upon what distribution of Linux you use. Right? I mean, those are business. I'm not going to go deep into that. But generally understand that nowadays, most of the servers are Linux-based servers. Even Amazon here, we use something called Amazon Linux. It is just a Linux distribution of, on top of that, Amazon would have optimized those kind of OS for Amazon use cases, right? So we call that as an Amazon Linux. Okay. And Linux is very, very convenient to operate. Even Mac OS is actually built on concept of Linux-based OS. We have terminal to manage and control everything, no? Mac OS. Right. Now, we now come to know the primary or major OS that are actually being used across the world is Linux, right? But is Linux is alone like enough for a computer to act as a server? On top of that, we should need something, right?
Yes, a web server.
All right. So on top of that, we should run something called web server. You can treat this web server as some kind of application that is running on your operating system. Okay, so that it will that application's purpose is to actively listen to particular incoming requests and send it back to the something called app server. We'll come to this app server part. Okay. So there are something called web server that should actually run in these operating systems or in these computers, so that it will listen to the active request originating from your network and coming to this computer. So let's say the primary work of this web server is to listen to the port called 443 or even 80 port. I was mentioning, right? 443 is for HTTPS based request and 80 for HTTP request. No. Now what this web server does, it is actually listening to these ports actively, or in other words, running on these ports, right? And monitor for any incoming request coming from the client. Now, if any request comes, the web server is actually going to redirect this request to the app server. Okay. The application server is where actual code or actual logic of how we are going to process this request is written, right? An example of how we can write an app server in Java is using a library called Spring. Have you heard of this? This is a very famous library that you can be used to write an application server, right? Or if you don't want to use Spring, Java itself has a support for handling all these requests, coming from the client. We call this Java servlets. Working with Java servlets is a little tough, but if you use a framework like Spring, it's going to encapsulate all the difficult logics inside. And using the Spring, you can just create an API. It's very, very simple. Right. So now this code written in Java in Spring is responsible for actually processing that API and returning that response back to your web server, and in turn back through the internet infrastructure, and in turn back to the client. This understanding of this is very, very important in understanding of further sessions that we are going to see this in the upcoming weeks. Is this clear? How a server actually functions? Right?
Can you please explain a little bit more about a Spring? You're talking about the API. It will be much easier than the Java servlet.
Okay. See, just put this to. I don't want to confuse by saying the term Spring and Java servlet. Let's just say these two are actually libraries in Java to understand and process our request. So when I say understand a request, we should understand what type of request this is, whether it's a GET request, right, or whether it is a POST request, or whether it's a PUT request. You should understand those things in the first place. Now it will understand those things. Then what is the next step it has to do? It has to understand whether the request that is originating from the client is actually authorized to the client or not. So it will validate for authentication and authorization of the client, right? Using by parsing the request header and analyzing the data. Once this is done, then it will, if the request body is there, then it will take the request body and do something. If it's a GET request, there will be no request body. It will take the query parameter we talked about before, right? Query parameter, var parameter. It will take the data and get the relevant details, or redirect you to the relevant detail, and return the response along with the response data and the success code, state 200 or 201 or whatever. All these work are actually done in the logic that you write inside this Spring or Java servlets.
Got it. Okay. But you say Java servlet is a little tough than the Spring, right?
Sorry?
You were saying that the Java servlet is a little tough than the Spring, because Spring is much easier to handle this API.
Yes. See, it is all depend upon the library that is written. No, Java servlet is actually library that is inbuilt in the Java EE version of your Java, Java Enterprise Edition. So, but working with that is a little complicated because primarily of how we are going to deal with the data. There will be something called HTTP request and HTTP response class. You have to manually go and get all these data from the headers or the request body or the query parameters by calling the right methods. And you have to process the data one by one. But whereas if you use Spring, it is very, very easy. Everything's done automatically for you. I mean, it is server-based concepts I don't want to get deep into, but understand processing the data, why we have so many libraries written for different purpose. We have Apache Puwe to read your Excel files, right? And technically, you can also write one library to read an Excel file or Word document, why we actually need a library like Apache POI, because it has certain set of inbuilt methods and mechanisms so that you can read this Excel file very, very easily, right? Similarly, the Spring makes this developing this API very, very faster and easier. So only we need these frameworks.
Thank you. Thank you.
So on a very high level, we are understanding what is happening in the server. Okay. Now, I was talking about getting the data from the server, right? Now, this application server, work of the app server is what? To process this data. I was talking about whether to understand whether it's get data or put data, right? Now, let's say we are actually requesting some data from the server, right? Now we are sending as a get request. Now the get request comes to the server. Now the app server understood that it's a get data. And it also read some query parameter or path parameter to understand what data that it's trying to get. Okay. Let's say I want to get some student information. Okay. Let's say you are running some college. Let's name that college at XYZ, right? And the URL for your college is like something like https xyz.com. Okay. So let's say you want to some student detail of a particular student, right? So in this example, how you can design your URL to get a student detail? So I just need to set the context, no? It's a XYZ college, okay? And in the URL can be constructed like this. I can say student, right? And I can pass the student ID. Let's say student ID is 123. Can I do something like this? Can I construct the URL like this? Or in other words, can I design the server to be able to understand this kind of request?
Yes.
Yes, right. Now, if this URL goes to the server, now the server will parse this URL and will understand, hey, this request has originated from our college, yes. And what data they are requesting, it will understand this part. Now they are requesting the student data. And what student I need to process? I need to process the student called student ID called 123, right? Now all these informations are available in your server. No? Now the server is responsible for taking this 123 student ID and go and fetch this student details somewhere, right? Generally, let's say where you will store the student kind of detail. Let's put it in a very simple manner. Any one example can you give me? Any examples of where we can potentially save the student details?
Database.
Database, yes. What kind of database?
Yeah. So I mean, will be a RDBMS wherein you have a table as a student. And
yes.
then you can say
it can be relational database like RDBMS, yes. Let's take a simple example of MySQL. No, MySQL is an relational database and very famous. I hope you knows about this database, no? Yes or no? So in this example, let's say I have a MySQL table with the 3 columns. Let's say the column is ID and name, right? And the course. Let's put some data here in the table. Like let's say ID is 123, and let's say the name is Karthik, and let's say the course is say CSC. Actually, I'm an EC student, but let's say the ID is 456 and the name is like it's some random name, some Vikrant I saw something. Vikrant, then he's from IT. Let's have the 2 data in this database. No? Now, what is the work of this server? Now we have given this information. Hey, fetch the data of 123, right? Now the server responsibility of the server is to understand that the ID is 123. After that, what should it do? Any answers? Let's
Yeah,
name
it
this.
will,
Yeah.
it will pass the request and give it to the web server. Then web server will parse the request and will interact with the database, and then will match with the database that does this ID and which is requesting exist, and then it will give response to the whatever.
Yes. Correct. So what is
data parsing is actually happening?
Sorry?
How this data parsing is actually happening while fetching the request?
I mean, data parsing this URL.
Yes.
Okay. So the parsing is URL is actually done in 2-3 ways. Okay. Let's say the endpoint is not endpoint is resolved to an IP address I was talking about, right? Yeah, the Google will have an IP address, right? Similarly, my xyzcollege.com will have an IP address. Now, I mean, that part is clear, right? Now, IP address will have a specific server allocated to it in the internet world, which will be unique for that IP. These are public IPs, right? Public IPs I'm talking about. Now, the internet will know exactly in which server to hit and get this response, right? Right or not, based on the IP address that is resolved from xyz.com. That much is clear, no? Now, as we saw previously, this request comes to the web server and in turn comes to the application server. Web server will listen the port called 443 since it's an HTTPS server. No. Now, what it will do, it will redirect this request to your application server. While redirecting, my question is, will this domain will be still xyz.com?
I mean, the authentication will always be done by the IF server. So xyz.com, he will only allow you if you are xyz.com. Then only, it will cater your request. Otherwise, from the app server itself, response will be get that you are not authorized.
No. See, xyz.com is primarily used to resolve your IP address, no? But when it comes to the computer that is holding this server code, this xyz.com is still relevant? Is it still relevant?
Yeah, I mean, you need a URI and a resource to manage the request.
See, this is important to understand how we are going to process the request. But this is not important, right? Because we have already reached this stage. Since xyz.com is resolved to an IP address, it is already reached to the server, right? This is not important. What is important is this part, right? It may be a little confusing at the beginning, but let's say, okay, for sake of simplicity, let's say we are having this xyz.com itself, but this is resolved, right? Resolved a particular IP address. Now, what we are going to process only this part of the information, this part of the URL. No. Now, what it will do is there will be a mapping, one-to-one mapping in the server, so that how this data is actually processed. Okay. What that one-to-one mapping is? The mapping, first mapping will be in the HTTP method level, right? Okay. It will read the HTTP method. Is it a get method? Yes, it's a get method. Now, get method is fine, but there'll be so many get methods in my server. What is that get method? Is it relating to, or is it specifying to, right? Then only it will read the other part of this URL. No, it is a get method to get to the student, right? Now the list is narrowed down. Okay, student is fine, and inside the student also have so many get methods, right? This particular term, we call this as a controller. In your API or in your just setting up an API, you would have heard of this term called model view controller, right? MVC pattern. This term is familiar.
Yeah, it's programming. Yeah.
Yes.
System.
Yes. So this in the MVC, this controller part is responsible for parsing this side of your information, the rest of the side. Right now, the controller will understand this is a student, yes, but also it should need to understand what student is this, right? Now it will have a mapping to a method written in Java, right, inside the server, to map to this particular or process this particular student ID called 123. Okay, if time permits, we will see how this server is actually processing by writing a actual server code. Okay, but for simplicity's sake, understand there's a controller library that is written in server, which is going to read these two informations, and it will know where to redirect to subsequently, right? Because we would have written the programming logic like that one, right? This everything is managed by this entry point called controller. Okay. Now the controller will know which method to redirect this request to. In that method, what logic we would have written? Logic of establishing connection to our MySQL database. This is very important, right? Establishing a connection. And logic of querying MySQL with ID. So anyone can say the syntax of how we can query our MySQL table with this ID 123. Right?
Select asterisk
Yeah.
from student
Yeah.
where the student underscore ID equal to 123.
Yes. So select star. It's not only ID we're going to select. Select star from student table where ID is equal to 123. So that query will be executed inside this MySQL, and it will return a response, right? What response it will return? It will return only the response called 123, Karthik, and CSC. No, this response will be returned from MySQL, and what should be the next step? The response has to be converted to what format?
JSON format?
Yes. So now
JSON.
server is responsible for converting this response to a JSON format, right? And returning it back to client. We can specify what format we need in the server itself. For example, this key should be ID, right? And the JSON will be something like this, right? ID 123, name Karthik, and department CSC. So while you are viewing this response, you will view like this as an API response. But on the background, what is happening? The request will reach the server, and it will result to an IP address and will reach to the computer where the server is going to process this data. And this controller is responsible for resolving this endpoint information to a particular method to call inside the server, and that method will establish connection to the database, and the database query will be executed, and the response is converted to a JSON and written back to the client. All these processes are actually executed within the matter of millisecond, right? Yes or no? If you're hitting a particular API and keep on waiting for the results, then it's a bad experience for the user, no? So everything is super fast in execution, right? What is the hard limit of speed that you can achieve with your API calls, or rather transfer of data within the internet? Hard
10
limit of the
seconds.
speed.
10 seconds is the bare minimum.
I don't know, I mean, those are the protocols that we define. Technically, in which speed the data is communicated within the internet? It's actually communicated in light speed, no? Light speed is the hard limit.
Nanosecond, yeah.
3 into 10 to the power 8, right? 8 meters per second is the hard limit. Because everything is established in a fiber optic cable, right? Fiber optic connection throughout the internet. Okay, now we are understanding the basic principle of how the server is actually working. No? Any queries with respect to this? I hope it isn't that much complicated example that I have given here. And simple to understand, I guess.
What was the question again?
I mean, we are understanding basic concepts of how the server is working.
Oh yeah, I understand now. Yeah, please.
Okay. Cool. Now, this is a very simple example of a student whose data is inside the MySQL table, inside a relational database. And our server is established a connection to this MySQL. And we are querying the MySQL and returning the response. Is this the real world scenario? Yes, it can be one of the real world scenario. Even my previous company or in my current company, Amazon primarily uses something called DynamoDB. I hope you heard of this term called DynamoDB anywhere. People
Heard this terminology, but I don't know in depth.
DynamoDB is one of example of a NoSQL database. Databases are primarily classified into SQL versus NoSQL. No, right?
Yeah.
SQL databases are whatever we saw example, right? MySQL is a SQL database. What can be other example of SQL database?
The Oracle.
Or
Oracle.
SQL Server,
Even
Microsoft SQL Server.
SQL Server, DB2.
Yes.
DB2, yeah.
DB2 is owned by
Derby database.
IBM, no?
IBM, yeah.
Yeah.
Even MySQL is owned by Oracle. Big corporations. Okay. So these are examples of
Derby.
Yeah. Yes, someone was asking question. Can you do this in the Postman? Yes, of course, we are going to do these things in Postman, right? So before jumping into the Postman directly, just wanted to clear some concepts related to API and how the actual functionality works. Simply using the Postman means like filling some data. See, just open the Postman console actually. If we are understanding this, Postman is actually a very, very simple tool to use, nothing complicated in that actually.
And what's the example of NoSQL too?
Yes, we'll come back to it. So Postman is just a simple example of putting some, filling some fields here and there, no? Filling the field of an URI, filling the fields of the header, filling the field of a body, and if you hit send, right, it will actually send the request, no? But what is actually happening is more important, right? And one more famous example of MySQL is Postgre. No? Okay, NoSQL example as I seen, like inside, if you have worked with AWS, it primarily relies upon a NoSQL database called DynamoDB. Right. I'll come to what's a NoSQL, right? And what if any other knows other examples of NoSQL, maybe you can. Mongo, yes. MongoDB.
Cassandra.
Cassandra, yes. And there's something called Elasticsearch, call it as an ES. So these are the examples of NoSQL database, right? And anything which is not in a SQL format, relational format. So SQL format is not only about data stored in the table, no? Let's go back to the same example of student table. We are seeing this data in the form of table structure, no, rows and columns. But is it really storing in the form of row and column in the actual data store? Any answers?
I would say yes. SQL database, right? You saw row and column, right?
We are seeing the response as a row and column, right? But actually, data is stored in the what format? Data is actually not stored in the row and column format. It's a
BT structure.
It is stored in some format called B tree. If you have time, just go and find this out in internet, right? But while returning the response for our view to visualize it, we are seeing it in the format of row and column as a table, but it is actually stored in the format called B tree. B-tree data structure. Okay. Okay. Now, but why this is called a RDBMS? Why SQL is different from NoSQL? It's not because of this tabular structure, but because of how the data is stored in the form of relationship between two data.
Also, the concept of the normalization is implemented.
Yes. So today I can have one more table called student details and normalize the data, no, and create a relationship between student and student detail. Here in the student detail, what columns can I have? I can have an ID, and I can have student address, no, address, and email ID, and phone number. No? And how can I normalize this data by forming a relationship between the two tables? By creating a primary key foreign key relationship, right? I can say a foreign key column called student ID, student underscore ID, right? Which will directly map to the student ID. No? Here, let's say I can insert one row called one student detail ID called 1, and the address is like let's say USA, or email ID is like karthik@gmail.com. Phone number like something phone number, right? And in the student ID, what I will give?
Integer.
What is the data I should give here to map this particular Karthik's detail and form a relationship? This should be 1 to 3. Right?
It should be unique and should not be null.
Yes, but I should give this as 1 to 3 so that it is going to refer to this 1 to 3 here, right?
Right. Because it is a foreign key. Yeah.
Right. So we are establishing some relationship between two tables here and actually normalizing the data. What's the normalizing the data actually?
Removing the redundancy of data.
Redundancy. We don't have to continuously store duplicate data for the same entity that is stored in the database. To remove redundancy and actually remove duplication, we can optimize the storage by storing all these things in a normalized form. These things were primarily important in those olden days where the application is very much slow, or internet itself was very much slow, and data has to be super optimized in storage, right? So only they have introduced the MySQL kind of databases in before 40 years or 50 years, primarily for banking application and all those things. Because those times memory is very expensive, no? Even 2 MB of data used to cost so much dollars and so much rupees in those days, right? Remember the floppy disk? No one uses floppy disk nowadays, right? 1.44 MB or 2.88 MB, and it have so much space and money, right? Money is lesser, 10 rupees or 20 rupees, but think of the space, how much it is occupying. So the memory was very expensive idea in those days. To optimize the memory, we have actually gone for MySQL kind of database. But in the modern world, memory is very, very cheap, right? Comparatively, at least. You can get even 1 terabyte of memory card within the palm of your hand, right? That too for maybe 500 rupees or 600 rupees, right? So since it became cheap, you don't have to necessarily worry about the duplication of the data while you store. You don't have to form a relationship between two tables like this while you're storing the data. So in those kind of scenarios, your NoSQL database comes into picture, right? Cassandra and DynamoDB can be almost equals like a white column database with a key value format, right? Primarily, the NoSQL database works in the concept of key value format. There'll be a key and there'll be a value, right? Even MongoDB is a key value pair, except that it's in a JSON format, in a document format. MongoDB stores in the document or JSON format the data inside it. Even same goes for Elasticsearch. No? So these are the NoSQL databases where the data duplication is so much happening, but still we don't have to necessarily worry about like data duplication in this modern world, right? But still, MySQL is there, right? Why we have to go for NoSQL databases in the first place? Because of two important reasons.
Of the heterogeneous, data sources.
Heterogeneous, no, I won't say it's because of heterogeneous nature of data sources. It's primarily because of speed and availability and concurrency. A MySQL database can able to serve 1,000 requests per second, maybe. NoSQL database can handle a lakh requests per second, right? And because of that purpose, because of that feature of a NoSQL database, it's very highly concurrent because it is able to serve so much higher traffic than MySQL and highly available. Availability in the sense, even if 1,000 users go and use some data today, right? It should be able to serve all those 1,000 requests. It should not time out, right? Like our IRCTC, no? And it should be extremely fast in serving the data to us, right? So all these three, yeah.
And one more thing, I may be correct or not, but you can you can inject any data you want for the NoSQL so that it will pop up there, right? But the
What do you mean by inject any data you want?
Like one of the applications if I'm using and that has to go through the NoSQL data, so I can use any dummy data. So want to make sure that that data is pop up there.
No, you mean to say like you can store any type of data there?
Yeah, I mean, so I can just insert any kind of data. Like I mean, any like let's say I can put now name something like that Karthik and another name like something else, who shouldn't be stored in the data like a SQL in the format of like B-trees, right? But in NoSQL, you can put anything just for testing purpose.
So see, your answer is yes, partially yes, but still you just cannot go ahead and put any type of column, any number of columns, any number of data inside a NoSQL. Even that has something called template, right? And list of fields you have to specify what kind of fields that you are actually going to put inside a NoSQL, right? Okay. But if you define a very generic field like a string or a JSON node kind of field, yes, you can technically put any number of data in the particular field. But the defining or specifying the field is also there in NoSQL. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay. It's not like simply we can put any number of data in the NoSQL. It doesn't work like that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. So all these factors come together so that a single, data from the NoSQL database is very much intuitive and useful nowadays. Doesn't mean that MySQL is going to go down the hill. It also has its own use cases and applications. Just know that whenever we are testing an API, right, data is there might be some scenarios you want to test that data in the database so that you verify that API is working properly or not. So in those kind of scenarios, so you should not be in the presumption that it is only MySQL kind of database. It can be NoSQL database also. Or in the other examples, right, the data can be served from CDNs. We saw in the example of Google, no? Right? So based on the example of the Google we saw, why is serving a home page of Google doesn't have to come from a SQL or NoSQL database? Why it has to come from a CDN? Any?
Yeah, because content delivery network helps you to judge where the request is coming from and from where to cater it. Like it will decide from which geography it is coming from, and then the data center the content delivery helps for the data to traverse rightly and more speedily in the form of response.
Right. That is absolutely correct. But also there is a concept of which content we should put in a CDN. No? Can we put this student database in a CDN? Not feasible, right? Because every time we cannot know which data it is going to, which student I'm going to query. based on that assumption only, I cannot put everything in the CDN. No. So what content can be put in a CDN is static content. So these are dynamic contents, right? This ID can be tomorrow 456, name can be something, department can be something. So what are the content that are not going to change or at least some period of time can be called as static content, right? For example, this HTML page which loads the Google is a static content or not? Yes.
Yes.
Right. It's a static content. No? This HTML is actually a static content. Right. And what is an example of other static content in this same web page? Is this image a static content?
No.
Image is static, and who says yes and who says no? Yes, image is actually a
static. Yeah, it is a static content.
Image is actually static content. Right? It doesn't necessarily change over the period of time unless you go and change it. In that case, it will be removed from the CDN and reloaded back from your original database through CDNs. No? And what about the JavaScript and the CSS files? Can those be?
It is also static.
Yes,
Static.
yes.
You know, once a first server call is made, then you know it automatically all the components are saved which are statically onto your browser itself, so that you know there are no further server calls are made when you access the same page again.
Yes, yes, absolutely right. So any content that can be deemed of not going to change for the particular query or over the period of time can be deemed as a static content, like your JavaScript files, CSS files, HTML files, images, right? So all those things can be put in the CDN and delivered from there, or as you rightly explained, it can be actually cached in your browser so that it doesn't hit CDN or server every time and can be cached in your local browser itself, right? Unless you hit this browser manually again, right? Reload this again. And there's something called, once you open this console and you right click this, there's something called hard reload. Someone noticed this actually?
Yes.
No? Yeah. So caching and hard loaded is it will see every website will have some local information stored in their browser, you know, right?
Application storage.
Yes.
Under the application tab.
Yes, yes, under the application storage. If you see here, under the application tab, some data will be stored, right? Sources tab, something you can see what data is actually classified here.
Correct. Right. And even though, you know, nowadays, since, you know, privacy has become a big factor rule, so that's why, you know, every of the website and enclose a disclaimer that we accept the cookies, just for, you know, letting people know that we will be accepting cookies.
Yes, true. And for a small context, I hope everyone would have heard of the recent Facebook layoffs. Do you know why? If you notice the Facebook performance in the recent years, it has gone down the hill. Do you know the reason why actually? Any answers?
Yeah, because you know,
it injects the JS
Meta is storing a privacy data, and you know, people are worried about that whatever you know, whatever they do it on their phone, then all the things are being recorded, and their privacy is on stake.
Facebook basically injects the browser applications like Facebook and Google injects a small JS, which collects the user information, and on the basis of that personal information PI they use to serve the ads.
Right, right. And at least according to me, serving personalized ads is not necessarily a bad thing. And those kind of tracking the user is actually anonymous. The ad that is served to you actually doesn't know whether I'm Karthik or not.
It gives personalization, personalized data for a particular user that I also feels like it's helpful.
Actually, it will assign one ID to me, like, okay, this is a tracking ID for Karthik. It will not know that person is Karthik, but there is some person called XYZ with this tracking ID. And the tracking ID will be used to by multiple websites when I access this internet or multiple apps in my phone, right?
Google used to use that as a Google advertising ID, GID in your phone.
Yes. So actually, you can go ahead and delete the GID and refresh the GID. Your
Yes.
entire preference will change if you notice
Yes.
after that.
Yes.
So it is actually anonymous. It's not like what actually people put outside where everything is tracking, thing like that. So companies like Google and Facebook primarily relies on advertisements, right? There are two main reasons for Facebook's downfall. One is like their Facebook is very boring nowadays. At least I feel that. So someone maybe like, I don't know if everyone feels the same. The usage of Facebook, at least my friend circle and me, becoming less day by day. Agreeing or not? Right. So as the user, yes. Sorry, go ahead. Right. And so because Facebook actually realized this before a few years, so they wanted to expand this business. So only they purchased Instagram, they purchased WhatsApp and whatnot. And even Instagram's popularity is actually, at least is there in India to some extent. I mean, it's there in throughout the world to some extent. Again, TikTok is actually overtaking Instagram to be a number one like app outside India, since it's banned in India, right, and few other countries. So TikTok is overtaking that, and markets like US, WhatsApp is less, and iMessage is more. So because of all these purposes, the number of user engagement inside the Facebook platform, Meta platform, or to be in other words, is becoming very less. And also, one nail in the coffin came in the form of Apple, right? Apple decided that from the iOS 14, or I'm not sure. So stop tracking the user. There is an option in iPhone, so where you can disable the tracking feature. Right, it hit the Facebook very hard, right? And since it is not able to
That
save the
Apple Apple update comes after the Pegasus thing.
Okay, that I'm not sure, but I think everyone is
publish a press note as well.
Yes. So everyone knew about this Apple. I think it came from the Apple Chol, that lineup, I guess, the privacy setting to disable this tracking feature, right? And since advertisers realized the Facebook is not going to serve this traffic, relevant traffic anymore to the users, they stopped giving less advertisements, and in turn revenue hit hard for Facebook. And their new venture called Metaverse is still in a very early stage. So their earnings plummeted, and in turn the recession, everything kicked down, and their recession layoffs happened. But on small trivia, Facebook, I mean, the Apple says it cares about the privacy and the ad situations, right? Even Apple started its own ads recently, if you have noticed, who are using iPhones. Yeah, some ads are randomly popping up in the Apple-based apps. So now Apple is trying to take control of this ad revenues. That's the context. So basically, what as an API testers we can learn from is like cookie tracking is very, we'll see about all these in detail. What's a cookie, authentication, authorization, and there are a few more concepts are there. And from tomorrow, what we can do is like we can just jump into PostMan, or we can use terminal to trigger a basic API request and see what happens, and like try to analyze from that point of perspective as well, right? And to analyze what is actually in deep happening in an API request. So once we put all these components separately and start to have this mental mapping of, okay, these are the components of an API, these are the purpose of each components, and what are the use cases of components, right? So based on all these things, if you understand, then using the Postman or Rest Assured or whatever is just a matter of personal choice of tool to manually hit your API or automate the API. Nothing more than that.
So Karthik, I mean, what is Rest Assured and everything, and can we integrate our framework with any of the tool? Like, if I want to use a Ready API, or if I want to use a JMeter for, to testing the web service. So can I can I integrate with
Yes. I see. The basic purpose of going with any Java-based libraries ecosystem is vast, right? If you are creating a framework, such that you are integrating your JMeter based libraries or your rest assured, then of course it's going to be super simple. It's not only about JMeter or performance testing or ready API or whatever it is, right? Anything can be put together in Java. Any tool, random libraries can be put together in Java and form a third library, right? Depending upon what use case you're going to develop. So in that sense, yes, everything is possible.
Okay.
See, you just have to just think of in this level, whatever you're seeing as an API request here, if it is the same request, if it is executed via PostMan, it's called PostMan request. It's the same request. It's executed via some Java code written in rest assured library. It's called rest assured request. That's it. Nothing different from whatever you see in the browser or in the PostMan or even the rest assured. Just how we are going to trigger the request varies depending upon the client. In typical browser, we trigger the request best by hitting the enter and giving the URL, right? In the Postman, we fill the data and hit the send button. And the rest assured, we actually write some Java code to fill in some right details like URL headers, request body, and all those things, and trigger the request. The concept is same, but the how we trigger the request is actually going to be different.
Okay. And I believe that rest assured, when we say the rest assured framework, the name supports both kind of web service like SOAP and REST, right? I mean, it does not disregard me in automating any kind of
no. See,
yeah.
rest assured name itself says, right? It's for rest.
Yeah. So that's what it was confusing. Yeah. So that's.
So it's for REST-based services. So SOAP is actually not part of this curriculum, right?
Okay.
As I said previously, SOAP is almost outdated. So primarily we are focusing on the REST-based services, and for automation also, we are going to be the REST-based kind of automation only.
Okay.
SOAP is completely different. All right. So we'll wrap the session for today, and we'll continue in the same time tomorrow, right? 6 p.m. IST. And that will be your demo session too. As I said previously, we'll see some more concepts and we'll jump into PostMan and see what is happening here. And
Karthik, what are the course detail, like, how, for how many weeks this course will commence, and
what are the actual things that we are going to see in this course? I'll have an Excel sheet where at the end of the tomorrow session, I'll show it to you. And this course has already started along with its demo sessions. It is going to be like 7 to 8 weeks, maybe 7 weeks, max 8 weeks, right? Along with this week. Okay. So from the next week, it's going to be continuation of the coming things that we already saw in this week.
Okay. And since you are recording, so will you share these recordings to us as well?
Yes. Recordings will be available with as a URL link with Rahul. You can ping in the WhatsApp group or however you are in contact with Rahul, right? You can actually ask Rahul, he will give you the recording link back.
Okay.
Yeah, I never done the API testings. I'm a manual tester, so I don't know. Hopefully, you will go from very scratch, right?
Yes. I hope whatever I started is a scratch. If it feels little at once, please say me. Maybe I'll slow down the pace little.
Yeah, I might be ask you stupid questions or any question.
No question is a stupid question. Like even in my current role, I ask so many trivial questions to my teammates, and because of their help only, I'm able to kind of managing everywhere. No, some question we might not have experienced those things in our entire career, so it will be totally new for us. Someone would have worked on that, so it will be little okay for them. So it all depends upon which area you work. That is only if no question is a basic or trivial question.
All right. Thank you. See you tomorrow. Thanks.
Yes, and regarding the WhatsApp group, I think you can ping Rahul or call him, or if someone is there, please add the other persons here.
Hi Karthik, the sessions will be on the weekends or it will be on...
Yes, it will be on the weekends between 6 to 8 p.m. IST.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
So Karthik, you said call Rahul. I mean, how we can get a contact of Rahul and everything like.
I assumed that everyone had Rahul's contact number. If I am not, I'm posting in the chat window here. Just a minute. So this is his contact number. You can just call him, or this is his WhatsApp number as well. You can just WhatsApp him. He will add you to the group. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. And any other questions? Anyone? So if not, can we wrap up the chat and wrap up the session? Course fee again, everything goes to Rahul. I'm just an instructor here, helping relating to content and other things.
Yeah, we are good, Rahul. Oh, sorry, we are good.
Okay, thank you for joining. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day or a good night wherever you are.
Thank you, Karthik.
Thank you, Karthik. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.